Okay, we're going to start looking today at a Maamar Basi Legani, which is one of a series of Maamarim that the Rebbe said over close to 40 years, almost 40 years, where every year on Yud Shvat, which was the anniversary of the passing of the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, the Rebbe's father-in-law, the Rebbe would have a Farbrengen, a gathering, and say a Maamar. And the Maamar would be based on the last discourse that was given out of the previous Rebbe for the day of his passing. There was a Maamar that the previous Rebbe had said earlier that was only printed and distributed for the Shabbos that the Frierdiker Rebbe passed away. And it was called Basi Legani. That was the name of the Maamar, which we'll explain what that means soon. And so that Maamar was seen as sort of a spiritual testament and will for the Chassidim, for the previous Rebbe passing, because it was a Maamar that he'd said earlier, but it was prepared for print and only published on the very day of his passing. So the Rebbe would every year, starting a year later, say a Maamar based on one of the chapters of that Maamar. It was a 20-chapter Maamar, and so for 20 years, every year the Rebbe would say a Maamar expounding upon that Maamar, and then did it again for another 20 years. And the tradition has become to every year to learn the Maamar of the Rebbe that corresponds to the chapter of that year. So this year, we're in the year Tafshin Ayin Gimel, 5773. So it would correspond to the year Tafshin Yud Gimel, which was 5713, or 1950, would have been the end of 1952 or the beginning of 1953, where the Rebbe said a Maamar based on the third chapter of Basi Legani. So let's get into it. The Rebbe starts with a quote from a verse, the book from the Shir HaShirim, that says, Basi Legani chosi kala. I have come to my garden, my sister the bride. Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, is a love song, a love poem, talking about a man and a woman who are in love. But it's really referring to Hashem and the Jewish people and our relationship as a romantic relationship. So one of the verses says, Basi Legani, I've come to my garden, my sister the bride. So who is speaking? I have come to the garden, my sister the bride. Who's speaking? Hashem is speaking. And he says, I've come to my garden, my sister the bride, referring to the Jewish people. What is my garden? What does it mean I've come to my garden? So the Medrash on Shir HaShirim says, Legani Leganuni. My garden means my pleasure place, the place where I take pleasure. Just like when you grow a garden, it's for a place to relax, to enjoy. That's the point of a garden. No, I think I don't have one. That's the last one. You got more? So, a garden is a place of pleasure, which means the place that I really belong, the place that I was originally. So, what does that mean? Because at the beginning of creation, Hashem's main presence was in this lowly world. Not in the heavens, but in this lowly world. This was the focus of the divine presence. And it was through the sin of the Eitz Hadas, the tree of knowledge, Adam and Eve's sin, and the consequent sins of the generations after that, that banished the divine presence from this world to higher worlds. And specifically, the Medrash lists 7 sins, starting with Adam and Eve, that caused the Shekhinah to go up to the 7th heaven. And then the Tzadikim of the generation, starting with Avraham, with Abraham, and Yitzchak and Yaakov, so on and so forth, the various Tzadikim, all the way down to Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the 7th of the line of Tzadikim, and the 7th is always special and beloved, says the Medrash. So these Tzadikim, these 7 Tzadikim, brought the Shekhinah back down from the 7th heaven to the 6th to the 5th, all the way down to this world, this physical world. Okay, so again, this is a concept in the Medrash, and it's a very central concept that Chassidus speaks about very often, and that is that originally this world was the focus. This world was where Hashem's presence was focused. And the Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve lived, was a place of divine revelation. It was only through the sin that Adam and Eve sinned, so the divine presence left this world and was banished to a higher world. You know, we call the Garden of Eden when we talk about the Garden of Eden, what are we talking about? Gan Eden. We're talking about a place where souls go to bask in the Hashem's glory. But Adam and Eve lived in the Garden of Eden. So what happened? Did the Garden of Eden go somewhere else? Was the Garden of Eden originally a place on earth and then it went somewhere else? So no. Garden of Eden is not a geographical place that's describing a place. It's a level. It's talking about a state of being. The Garden of Eden means to live in a place where there's divine revelation. It used to be this world was the Garden of Eden, or the Garden of Eden was in this world. There was a physical place. Being here in this world, you could have a divine, direct divine revelation. Through the sin of Adam and Eve, that revelation was banished. The divine presence was no longer in this world. And so when it says that Adam and Eve were banished from the Garden of Eden, you could really understand it the other way around, that the Garden of Eden was banished from this world. That level of revelation was moved to a higher place. This world was no longer worthy of such a divine revelation. That was through Adam and Eve's sin. And then Cain's sin when he killed Abel banished the Shekhinah a further world, a higher heaven. And so on and so forth. Various sins at the beginning of creation banished the divine presence upwards and upwards and upwards to the point where it was at the seventh heaven, and this world was very distant from the divine presence. Then along came Avram Avinu. Abraham was the first Tzadik to start bringing the Shekhinah, the divine presence, back down to this world. And then Yitzchak continued, and Yaakov continued, all the way down to Moshe, who was the seventh generation from Avram Avinu. And Moshe Rabbeinu, being the seventh, the Medrash says the seventh has a certain specialness about it. The seventh day, we know, is Shabbos. The number seven has always a special significance. So Moshe, being the seventh, he was the one who brought the divine presence not just from one heaven to another, but from heaven to earth. How? Because Moshe Rabbeinu was the one who brought the Torah into the world, also who built the Mishkan, the tabernacle, which was the presence, the divine presence of Hashem in this world. And the seventh is always special. It's interesting that the previous Rebbe's Maamar said this thing, that the seventh is always special. The Rebbe was, of course, the seventh Rebbe in the line as well. So the job of the seventh Rebbe and the seventh generation is to bring the divine presence all the way down here into this world, to reveal it in the world. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu did. Now, Moshe Rabbeinu's achievement is described in the Torah in the following words. We're on the 6th line. Referring to Moshe Rabbeinu's bringing the divine presence down into this world, the Torah says that Hashem tells the Jewish people, make for me a sanctuary and I'll dwell amongst them. It doesn't say that I will dwell in it. It says I will dwell in them. That by you building a sanctuary, I will dwell in you. Meaning within every Jewish soul, the divine presence will rest. Which means through the fact that the Tzadikim, the righteous leaders of the generation, work on themselves to draw down the divine presence within themselves, and they impact their generation as well to have a connection to Hashem. Through that, they are able to draw down the divine presence in the world like it was originally at the beginning of creation. That is what tzaddikim do. What is the job of tzaddikim? Why do we have tzaddikim? Their whole function is to draw down the divine presence, meaning to make God real for us. That for the rest of us, we're not tzaddikim. Hashem is a concept, is an idea, is something written in books, or something we believe in. For tzaddikim, Hashem is a reality. That's how tzaddikim live. For them, Hashem is truth, is existence, is everything. And so, by tzaddikim living, and by us having connection with tzaddikim, by learning their teachings and watching their ways, so we also have a sense of the divine in this world, close to us. And so, in a very real, concrete way, a tzaddik makes Hashem's presence felt in the world. This is not just talking about an abstract concept of making the world holier. In a very real way, that when you have contact with a tzaddik, when you watch the way a tzaddik behaves, And when you read the teachings of a tzaddik, which is what we're doing, so then Hashem becomes more a part of your life, a revealed part of your life. That's the mission of tzaddikim. But more than that, that they actually draw down the main shechina, the main presence of Hashem should be in this world. Meaning not just that Hashem's presence should be also in this world, but in this world more than in the heavens. More than in a spiritual world, Hashem's presence should be down here in this world. As the Friedrich Rebbe says in his Maamar that was given out for the day of his passing, he explains what the Zohar says. The Zohar says a very powerful statement, and this again is a central teaching that Chassidus has expanded upon. What does the Zohar say? The bottom line: Kadeskafya sitra achra. When we subdue the powers of evil, the glory of Hashem spreads throughout all worlds. Again, when the power of evil is subdued, the glory of Hashem spreads throughout the world. What does that mean? What does it mean, the power of evil subdued? Yeah, what about it? The animal soul? When
you don't give in to the evil inclination.
Mm-hmm. Right? When you don't give in to the animal soul, to the evil inclination. So what happens is there's a revelation of the divine that spreads throughout all worlds. Meaning, we think that you're supposed to do the right thing, and then there's these forces that try and stop us. And our job is to not listen to those forces and to keep doing the right thing. And those forces are interruptions, are impediments to our spiritual life. So you try and do the right thing, you struggle to be good, to be moral, and upright, and do everything you need to do. And there's all these urges that come to you to do the wrong thing, or these distractions from the outside that try and influence you negatively. And we feel that if only they would get out of the way, if only we wouldn't have all these distractions, if only we would just have a clear, smooth path without these distractions, we'd be fine. Just there's so many forces that try and get us to do the wrong thing. What the Zohar says is, no, you've got to understand that every time you have an urge to do the wrong thing, or some type of blockage to do the right thing, that is an unbelievable opportunity. You now have the opportunity to withstand that, to not follow that urge, to overcome it, and by doing that, the divine light that you draw down is awesome. The divine light that's drawn down through resisting a negative urge and not doing what you're not supposed to do, that divine light is so powerful. It's in all worlds. The highest and lowest worlds all receive a divine flow of energy from that act, which you couldn't do if you didn't have a Yetzer Hara. If you didn't have any evil inclination, if you didn't have any temptations or distractions, you'd never be able to do that.
For any person can do that.
Sure. I mean, if you're a tzaddik, it's harder because you don't have so many temptations. But if you're not a tzaddik, then for sure.
The tzaddik can't stand where both of the...
Right.
Is that where that comes from?
That's a part of it, yeah, because the power of negating the negative is so energetic. It generates such a massive power that you could only do that if you've got temptations, if you've got struggles. If you don't have struggles, you don't have that opportunity. So, I mean, this is not just a spiritual idea. This is something that's very, very real. If you think about it, anytime you have withstood a test, anytime you've been in a situation where you could have done the wrong thing, and it was very tempting to do it, and it would have been very easy to do the wrong thing, but you've somehow found this inner resolve to hold strong and not do it, and you overcame it, there's a certain flow of light, of energy that comes to you after that. You become very energized by such a thing. It's a very rewarding thing. It feels right when you do it. It's hard when you're at the moment, but afterwards, it gives you a real push. You feel a victory, like you just had a victory over evil. So that feeling is the divine light that is shining on you and throughout all worlds. It's a very big thing. So doing a mitzvah, doing something good is nice and is amazing and is powerful and is infinite. But holding yourself back from doing the wrong thing and overcoming an urge, that has a power that's even beyond, even higher. Self-control. So specifically what the Zohar says is that by subduing the power of evil, every time you do that, every time you do an act of self-control, of subduing the powers of evil, so the glory of Hashem spreads through all worlds. Now, the previous Rebbe in his Maamar explains, what does it mean, spread through all worlds? What's the relevance of that? What does that mean? So the top line, the Pirushoy ha'er shemei b'chula almin b'shaveh. The Frierdiker Rebbe explained what it means is that the level of divine light that you draw down through an act of self-control, of conquering evil, the type of light you draw down is the type of light that shines in all worlds equally. Meaning, there's two types of divine light, and this we've discussed several times. There's a divine light that shines in each world according to its level, and there's a divine light that is beyond that shines everywhere equally. Specifically, they're called the Ur HaMamala and Ur HaSovev. There's the light that fills all worlds, the Ur HaMamala, and there's the light that surrounds all worlds, or is beyond all worlds, the Ur HaSovev. There's a divine light that caters to different levels. That in higher worlds it shines more, in lower worlds it shines less. It's tailor-made, it's fitted to each world. Therefore, that light is a limited light. But then Hashem also shines in all worlds equally, meaning He's beyond all worlds, and so therefore He can be everywhere at the same time equally. Not tailored to the world, but beyond the world. So if you're talking about Hashem as He limits Himself, higher worlds there's more divine light, lower worlds there's less. But if you're talking about Hashem's unlimited self, He's everywhere equally. He's in the lower world and the higher world equally. There's no difference. Which light do we draw down when we do a mitzvah? Generally, it's the Ur HaMamala Kol Almin, the light that fills all worlds. We make the world more divinely full. But when we control ourselves, when we have self-control, we draw down the Ur HaSovev, the light that is equal in all worlds, the light that's completely beyond.
Is that generally related to negative commandments?
Yeah, generally, by not doing something, by fulfilling a negative commandment, you draw down something higher. Chassidus explains something that is a bit counterintuitive, and that is that what's greater, to do a positive commandment or to not do the negative commandment? Which is greater? So you would think that doing a positive commandment draws down some divine light. Not doing is just a non-act. It's not an act of something. Chassidus says no. By not doing, there's something even more powerful. Because when you do something, so the light you draw down is commensurate to your action, what you have done. By not doing something, you're allowing Hashem's light to come. In other words, a mitzvah is draw down this light. A negative commandment is stay out of the way, and a greater light can come down. And so that staying out of the way, by holding back, by controlling yourself, by overcoming a temptation to do the wrong thing and not doing it, in a way that has an even more powerful effect than doing something that's positive.
You see, like the positives all have a particular measure, like there's a shear for each positive, but the negatives, there's no limit to how you can not do something.
Correct. So a positive commandment is a limited expression of something, whereas a negative commandment is unlimited. Yeah. There's no limit to it. Correct. So the light that is drawn down is therefore a different quality of light. There's a divine light drawn down through the positive act, but that's going to be limited to the act. Whereas the divine light drawn down by holding back and controlling yourself is unlimited. Or you can put it in different words, that when you hold back to not do something, so you've done an act of self-restraint. You've put yourself aside, meaning I was ready to do something immoral. I was in the mood and felt like doing it. I had an urge and a drive and an attraction to do this thing that was wrong. And I could have done it, but I didn't do it. I negated myself, held myself back to not do it. as a result of that, what Hashem does is He also holds His limited self back to allow His unlimited self to be revealed. Because you transcended yourself, so Hashem will transcend His limitations that He created in the world, and He'll allow His infinite self to be revealed. You've gone beyond your limitations, so Hashem goes beyond His limitations, and His unlimited self is revealed. That's what it means that when you control, the Zohar says, when you subdue the powers of evil, the light that is in all worlds, the light spreads in all worlds, meaning the light that is equal in all worlds spreads and is revealed. The light that is beyond.
This is what happened to Yosef in Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
Control.
So does the surrounding light transform to limited light, or does it just the surrounding light which comes in?
It's the surrounding light that is drawn down. So we have an experience or a somewhat of a revelation of the light beyond.
So can this world contain that light?
Well, that's a big question. Can this world contain the light? That's a big part of our avoda, is to expand the capacity of this world. But at the moment, what it's saying is that you get a flow of the infinite light. Whether you can measure that or handle that, that's a different thing. But it impacts you. It impacts you.
It sounds like there's a connection between the days of creation and Shabbat. This positive and the negative.
Well, yeah.
Doing and not doing.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, there's creative energy, and then there's like leaving the world for what it is. Yeah, correct. So it's this light that's drawn down. Second line, v'hamshacha hi al yidei avoda diskafyu sitra achra. And how is the light drawn down? Through the avoda of holding yourself back and transcending the sitra achra, the powers of evil, subduing the powers of evil. In the temple, what this was represented in the temple through the avodah of karbanos, bringing sacrifices. Bringing sacrifice was taking the animal and burning it up on the altar of Hashem, which is similar to taking your animalistic side, your drives and urges, and sublimating them, elevating them to Hashem. Ubifrat ma'aser ketoros, and particularly this was reflected in the ketoros, in the incense that was burnt on the altar. And that idea is explained in other Maamarim. This also explains why the Mishkan was built from a specific wood. The wood that needed to be used to build the Mishkan was called Atzei Shittim. Atzei Shittim is translated as acacia wood. Why this wood? Why was Hashem fussy about which wood was used in building the Mishkan? You needed wooden planks. There's many different types of wood that you can get. Why was it Atzei Shittim, specifically wood from the acacia tree? Because the word Atzei Shittim means something. The word Shittim means something. Dine Shitta pirosh netia. V'chein pirosh shtus. The word Shittim, Shitta, means to verge, to stray, or to turn away. Mm-hmm. Like the word shtus. Shtus means foolishness, craziness. So what's the definition of what does crazy mean? What does it mean that somebody or something is crazy or foolish or wacky? It means that you're verging from the path. Like there's a certain straight and narrow, like expected, predictable path. Foolishness or craziness, insanity, means that you verge from the straight and narrow. So the Hebrew word for craziness is shtus. And the word shitta comes from that same source, to verge, to stray, to be a bit off. So then why would Hashem want the wood of the Mishkan to be from that? So dahainu, sheyesh davar shu emtzai. What this means is there's a middle straight path. But any divergence from that middle straight path, whether you go higher or lower, but if you're not on it, Nikra shita. That's called a shita. That's what the word means. Now, you could diverge higher than the normal path. You could elevate above the normal path. That's called shtus kedusha. That's called a holy craziness. There's a certain insanity or craziness that is holy. But diverging from the path in a lower way is called the craziness of the other side of the side of evil. Meaning, in life there's a normal straight path that you're supposed to go. There's a moral behavior that is expected of you. There's a certain etiquette of life that you're supposed to behave in a certain way. And there are expectations that you're supposed to do the right thing, avoid the wrong thing, stay on the straight and narrow. Now you could diverge from that path. What does it mean to diverge from the path of the straight and narrow? So usually what it means is that you have fallen below your expectation. You're acting in a way that you shouldn't. You're doing things that are wrong. You're misbehaving. You're not staying on the right path. That's one way to diverge from the straight and narrow. But there's another divergence from the straight and narrow. That is to go higher than expectation. To do more than is necessary. To be even holier than you need to be. That's called also a divergence. It's also a shtus. It's crazy. It's not normal. There's a normal path. You're doing things that are not normal. But that's not normal in a holy way. So what are we supposed to do? Out of those three paths, there's the normal, straight and narrow. There's diverging from the path by falling beneath the straight and narrow. Then there's going crazy overboard, doing too much. Where are we supposed to be? Straight and narrow. So the Rebbe says, Derech HaTorah Mitzvahs B'chlal, generally speaking, the path of Torah Mitzvahs, Hu Derech Emtzois, is the middle path. As the famous Rambam statement in the Hilchas Deis, at the very beginning of Mishnah Torah, he says that there are always extremes you can go on, but there's a middle path between the extremes. And that's where we're supposed to be. Not extremely this way, not extremely that way, but balanced in the middle. That was what the Rambam said. And that's how we're supposed to be. That's the ideal.
Long, short way.
So but if you go beyond that, if you go higher than the middle path, you do more than is expected of you, that's called shtus kedusha. That's called a holy craziness, a holy divergence. You've diverged from the normal, but in a holy way. You're not doing less, you're doing more. So, there the Rambam says you shouldn't be overly generous. Shouldn't be overly stingy. You should be in between. What's in between? It means that you are generous and kind and giving, but not to the point where you're just indiscriminately helping everybody and doing everything. You have to be balanced. You can't be so stingy either that you are completely self-absorbed and selfish. You have to share, but at the same time, a little bit of stinginess you need somewhat of a balance. Right? So extremely stingy is below the line. Extremely generous is above the line. And you need to be according to the line. It will be very holy for somebody to be extremely generous and giving. It is very holy, but it's crazy. Like it's not normal. There's a normal path where you have to look after yourself to a certain extent, and you can't just give everything you have away. So normally we would say stay on the middle path. But sometimes we do say that the shtus kedusha, being foolishly holy, being extremely holy, being over the top in holiness, sometimes that is the right thing to do. Sometimes we need that. Sometimes we need foolish holiness, particularly when we need to battle against the other type of foolishness, and that is diverging below the path. Like the Rambam himself does say this, that even though the middle path is the ideal, sometimes you do need to go to an extreme. And that is where you have fallen in a certain area to below what's expected of you. So then sometimes to balance yourself out, you need to go to the other extreme and be overly cautious in that particular area. So if you're a person who has been extremely stingy and has not been generous, so you may need to actually do the opposite and be extremely generous to try and counterbalance the stinginess that you've been struggling with. So sometimes we need shtus kedusha, we need a craziness, an insane holiness, where we go over the top in our holiness, in order to counter the other type of divergence, which is the divergence below the line. Like it says in the Gemara about I've forgotten who it was. One of the rabbis who at a wedding he would juggle hadassim. Actually, it was myrtle branches. He would juggle them, and he would do all these crazy tricks in front of a chassan and a kala at a wedding. Somebody once said to him, it's not really you're fitting for you. You're a dignified person. You're like making yourself crazy at a wedding. So he said, no, but for the mitzvah of making a chassan and kala joyous, it's worth it. And he was rewarded for that. It said that his shtus, his craziness, that he went over the top in order to celebrate at a wedding, it was good for him. It was the right thing. Sometimes you do have to go crazy. Sometimes it's the right thing. There's a holy craziness sometimes. That was an example. So, which means that sometimes the extreme craziness, to be crazy for a mitzvah, that is necessary because that counterbalances the craziness for the lack of mitzvah. In other words, we live in a world where people do crazy things. Like people are crazy in an immoral way, below the line of the straight and narrow. People have mesiras nefesh and great self-sacrifice to do the stupidest and most immoral things. There's so much craziness in the world that is immoral. So we have to balance that with a certain craziness for holiness, where you go over the line for holiness. In a world where things are very balanced, very orderly, and people are doing the right thing, and a moral type of world, so then that's all you need to do, just stick to the straight and narrow. But when the world has diverged from the straight and narrow, and when the most bizarre things people call normal, like the world we live in today, where the craziest, weirdest person is respected and is taken seriously, and the most twisted and immoral ideas are legislated and are honored and we're polite and respected. So in a world where things have gone crazy, so then you can't just stay on the straight and narrow because it's not strong enough. It's not going to combat the craziness in the world. You have to go crazy in holiness in order to combat the craziness that there is in unholiness. So the shtus of kedusha, the craziness of kedusha, is necessary when you need to combat the craziness of the other side, the opposite side. So just like sometimes personally you need to do that in order to counterbalance your weakness, you have to go to another extreme. So too, collectively, sometimes a craziness has to be developed in Yiddishkeit in order to counterbalance the other side. So that's why it's interesting to note that there were always different schools of thought within Yiddishkeit as to how extreme people should be in their keeping of mitzvahs. And there were many schools of thought that said that a nice, balanced life is the most important thing. That, in other words, be frum, keep mitzvahs, do what you need to do, as far as what the Torah says, but don't go overboard. You don't have to go overboard. Like do it in a nice, calm way. You can be a normal person, like they said, in Germany before the war, there was a big struggle there with assimilation, and there was a movement within Orthodoxy in Germany that said that you can be a civilized person, a part of German society, and at the same time, totally frum. You can make a nice balance. You don't have to be extreme. So you don't have to look so different to everybody else, and you don't have to act so different. You can act like everybody else, but just you do Torah mitzvahs, a nice balanced type of path. And that worked for certain people at a certain time. But there were others who said that no, in order to maintain Yiddishkeit, you have to go to the extreme. We have to completely be surrounded in Yiddishkeit and Torah. We can't in any way compromise anything. We can't assimilate, we can't modernize, we can't do anything at all. And there was a big tension, a philosophical tension in the Jewish world. Do we accommodate the modern world and become a part of it? and try and synchronize Torah with modernity, or do we completely shun modernity and make our own little enclaves and go to an extreme? So in a way there's a third path and a different path, and I think it's the only path that works today. That the first path, the idea of embracing modernity, becoming a part of it but staying from, that to a great extent has not worked, because the modern world has too much of a strong lure to it, that if you completely embrace it, it will swallow you up. On the other hand, to completely negate it and create a separate enclave and have nothing to do with the modern world, that also doesn't work, because it's not real. It's not reality. You can't just create a shtetl in the middle of the modern world and expect it to work. It's not bringing Torah down to this world. It's trying to escape to some other world. Another path is to be completely unapologetic and extreme in your Yiddishkeit, and have no fear of the modern world as well. Meaning, not to totally embrace the modern world, but to live in the modern world, but above it as well, to be completely above it. And that is living a life that is completely dedicated to Torah and mitzvahs, and you can still have a job, and you can still interact with those around you, but you're completely unapologetic. You don't water down or dilute anything in Torah and mitzvahs whatsoever. And that, because the lure is so strong, the draw is so strong in the modern world, to be very strong, to be extreme about your Yiddishkeit, is the only way to really survive with it. And that's because it's such a crazy world today. So the crazier the world is, the crazier you have to be about Yiddishkeit. And so that, the Rebbe, who was the 7th generation, who is teaching this Maamar, that was the path that he embraced. That on the one hand, he completely interacted with the modern world, but at the same time he was a total extremist when it came to Yiddishkeit. There was nothing that he compromised on, whatever, when it came to Torah and mitzvahs. There was no watering it down or adjusting Yiddishkeit to modern times at all. But at the same time, he was completely comfortable in the modern world. That's a shtus de kedusha to fight against the shtus de lumas there, a craziness in holiness, and a divergence from the straight and narrow, simple path, because the world is so crazy today. So the paragraph concludes, like this is what it says about the future. It says in the future, there's a prophecy which the Maamar will speak about later, that says that he irrigated the Nachal Shittim, the river of Shittim, which means in the future it's the shtus, it's the craziness that will bring Mashiach, that will cause Mashiach to come. Because it's that craziness, when you are crazy for the sake of holiness, to the point where you're able to withstand all the temptations and hold yourself back, that self-control, that's what causes the glory of Hashem to come down and be revealed in all worlds.